In this video, we're going to look at all the amps I've ever owned. Hey guys, this is Dr. McFarland, and in this episode of Doc Talk, we're going to look at all the amps I've ever owned. So if you're wondering why I know about tones so much, and I can dial in those sweet tones on my head rush and other gear, well, it's because I've owned so many different amps. I've kind of tuned my ear to how I think I want them to sound, so I'm able to apply that knowledge to all these different amps. Let's go ahead and look at the first one. We got the Ampeg GVT-15 1x12. So this was a 15 watt amplifier with a gain, bass, middle, treble, and volume and reverb. And there's a switch on the front. You can go from a 15 watt down to a 7. And there might have been a switch on the back so you can make it even less wattage. I don't really remember, but I thought these amps were really cool when they first came out. I got introduced to them at Corner Music, which was a store, currently still a store here in Nashville, but they've moved locations since then. A lot bigger location. So if you're in Nashville, definitely check out Corner Music, because they got some great guys over there, and gals. All cool guys and gals. So yeah, it's a 15 watt amp, so it gets pretty crunchy pretty fast once you start cranking the gain. And what was cool about this particular amp was the EQ section had a Bandaxel EQ. So when you cranked up the mids or the treble or bass, it actually added gain to the overall circuit versus a passive EQ, which kind of shapes the tone a little bit, but didn't really do much else. So that was the Ampeg GVT. They had the head versions. They had, did they have 60 watt versions? Can't remember. They had a lot louder versions with a lot more wattage. But this one just seemed like a really good size, and it kind of compared to like a Fender Blues Jr. in size. So I thought that was pretty cool. And the reverb sounded good too. So that's an overall good amp. And then this next one is the Carvin V3. So what you see here, you got channels 1, 2, and 3. Channels 1 was actually the highest gain channel, and then channel 3 was a clean channel. I don't know why they did it like that, but that's just the way it happened. You did have a effects loop and reverb that was switchable per channel. So if you wanted the clean channel to have maybe some delay and reverb, you could do that. And then when you change the channels on the amp via the foot switch, you can have that spill over. And, well, I don't know if there's a spillover, but you could have channel 3 be clean, and then channel 1 and 2 be totally dry with just extra amounts of, dirt. It had presence and resonance and, reverb level and all kinds of different stuff. And it actually had a boost in there as well. So off of each channel, you could add in an additional boost, which is pretty cool. That was my one and only Carvin amp. The Crate GX130. This one was actually my first big boy amplifier. And I think I got it around sophomore, junior year of high school. And my dad took me to L&M Music, and we were like, all right, what can we get for, $300 or something like that? So this fit the bill as far as the price range. It had a clean channel, a dirty channel, and a reverb. And it also had a chorus, built-in chorus on the amp as well, which, it's kind of neat. I think it came with either a 2 or 3 channel foot switch, 3-button foot switch. And did have an effects loop, which I wasn't too knowledgeable about at that point, because I really didn't own any other pedals. I think I eventually bought a wall pedal maybe shortly after, but other than that, I just plugged straight into the amp, used a foot switch to change the channels and turn on and off the reverb, and that was pretty much it. So this was pretty heavy. I did have the amp on casters, and I did use this amp in college as well, because I remember taking it up and down 3 flights of stairs in my dorm room, or dorm building, to go to Commercial Music Ensemble, which was a class there at MTSU, Middle Tennessee State University. And so here I am lugging down this huge, lugging down this huge amp, and got my guitar, got a backpack full of books and all kinds of stuff. And I don't think I carried it across campus. I might have put it in my car and drove to the music building. I think once or twice I did try to wheel it over there, and it's pretty hard. I don't suggest doing that. Okay. Alright, this next one, we are going in alphabetical order in this video, so we're just going straight down the list. This is the Peavey Delta Blues, and this is actually a 2x10, and I ordered this amplifier from Zounds.com, and I actually ordered the 1x15 because I always wanted to try a 15-inch speaker, combo, and so I put that on order, and they shipped me a 2x10 on accident. So I got the box, opened it up with excitement, thinking I was going to get a 2x15, and it's a 2x10. So I'm like, okay, well, shoot. Well, let me take it out of the box and plug it in and, see how it sounds. And it actually sounded pretty good. So I took it to band practice that night with my band Feedback Revival and cranked it up there in Dan's garage. And, it had a very glassy, clean tone, a very rock and roll sounding overdrive tone on the dirt channel. And it had tremolo and it had reverb. But I did not like the tremolo because it dropped the volume of your overall sound too much if you try to turn the depth of the tremolo up too much. And I didn't really like that, so I never really used the tremolo. But but everything else on the amp was great. And it had the nice tweed Tolex cover and a nice handle. It wasn't really that heavy. It's kind of big. I was driving a Honda Element at the time. So I loaded up the car with the amp and guitar and different stuff. So that was the Peavey. So here is a Rebel-20 from Egnater. And I'm pretty sure the guitar player for Chicago also uses one of these, as well as other Egnater models as well. But I saw a specific video on YouTube of him using this amp. I was like, okay, if it's good enough for the for the guitar player for Chicago, it's good enough for me, right? So I checked it out, and I bought this from Nashville Used Music here in Nashville, and I think it ended up having some kind of weird sound, like intermittent spark of volume kind of sound. Didn't really like that. You never knew when it was going to happen. So I took it back. It was like, hey, this amp is not working right. And the guy played it. Oh, what are you talking about? It sounds great. And then it did that intermittent volume thing. It was like, oh. He's like, wait. Did you hear that? Did you hear that? I was like, no, I didn't hear anything. Then it did it again. Then he couldn't deny that there was something wrong with it. So I think after about a week or so, he gave me my money back. And I just moved on from it. But, it wasn't their fault. It was just the way the amp was. But it does have a bright and tight switch, as well as master volume, treble, mid, bass, and gain. You can choose between a 1 watt and a 20 watt, and also an EL84 or a 6v6 blend, so you could blend between those two styles of power tubes, which is pretty cool. And it did have effects loop on the back, which is nice. No reverb though. And then the next one is the Egnater Rebel-30, which is a dual channel amp with the same tube mix. You got ELA4s and 6v6s. You have a 1 watt to 30 watt knob on both channels. So maybe channel 1 could be, a 1 watt sound, and channel 2 might be a high headroom 30 watt kind of sound. So that was very cool. The same gain, bass, middle, treble, and volume for the channel 2, and then you got just volume, bass, and treble for channel 1. And so I kind of had that Fender-ish kind of sound to it. And then tight and bright for both channels. And you can also adjust the amount of reverb that you wanted for either channel as well. So if you wanted channel 1 be totally clean with a little bit of reverb, you can do that. Then channel 2 can be totally dry or whatever. And what was cool about this, it did have a silent record option on the back for an XLR output. So I use this amplifier on the recording of Ballroom Alchemist, which is on the Hell and High Water album for Feedback Revival. So if you want to go to YouTube, type in Feedback Revival, check out that song, Ballroom Alchemist. And that's the sound of the Rebel-30 cranked up and going direct into the sound card. So there you go. All right, the next one is the Egnater Tweaker. All right, and Dan from Feedback Revival and now Voltage Hawk is still using this amplifier. This has a basic master, treble, mid, bass, and gain. The gain circuit has a hot and a clean option, so you can change the overall gain structure of the amp. And it still has a bright and tight, normal and deep, USA, AC, and Brit, and a vintage and a modern. And it does have an effects loop on the back, so that's pretty cool as well. And then the Egnater Tweaker-40. Alright, so this has dual gain pots for both channels. The tight and bright, normal and deep for both channels. It does have an effects loop. The only weird issue with this amp was it had a very noisy fan. So what I had to do is take out the fan and then insert some spacers in the fan, so that way the actual blade wasn't so close to the grill on the back. What was happening was the fan was so close to the grill that it was making this little whizzy kind of sound when the amp was on, and I couldn't stand that. So I kind of modded it a little bit, but I don't think I kept this amp very long. I tried using it with my Boss ES8 to change the channels back and forth and do some different stuff, but in the end it just wasn't quite worth using all that for. So, and I mainly use dirt pedals anyway, so I really didn't need a dual channel amplifier. So I just sold it back on Reverb where I bought it and moved it on to the next person. And that was getting to a Fender amp. I did have a Blackface Bassman amp I got from Guitar Center. Yeah, I had this amp for a short time. I felt like it was kind of noisy. I probably just returned it. More than likely just returned it back to Guitar Center because, you know, it just didn't really work out for what I needed. But, you know, great sounding amp. Here's a Fender Blues Junior. So what's funny about this amp was my friend Matt had a Blues Junior, and I think I borrowed it. Or I think I bought it from him. Yeah, that's what I did. I bought it from Matt. And then there's a local store here in Laverne called Mikey's Guitars, which is no longer there because it got bought out by a pawn shop, which is very sad. I'm not even sure if Mikey is still around anymore, but if he is, and you're watching this video, Mike, you rock, dude. So anyway, he had a Fender Blues Junior in his store, and I think it had a greenback. It had some kind of special speaker in there. So I went ahead and bought his. So then I had two Fender Blues Juniors at the same time, which is kind of ridiculous. I think I tried doing like a stereo setup at one point, but in the end, I think I maybe swapped out speakers or something. I don't know. The Blues Junior at Mikey's definitely sounded a little bit better to my ears. It wasn't as boxy sounding, and Matt's was definitely boxy. So, you know, in the end, I didn't end up keeping either of them. I think I sold them individually to different people. And so, yeah, that was my soiree with the Fender Blues Junior. Cool little amps. I actually went to a jam session Friday night where the guy was using the Blues Junior, and it sounded great. Here's a Princeton Reverb. I originally bought this amp from Guitar Center. I think it was a 1976 Silverface. And I did put this on a Guitar Center credit card, which I do not suggest doing. If you can't pay cash for something, you know, you probably don't need it. So I did put this on a credit card. I did have my friend who was in town at the time co-sign for me because I didn't have any credit at all. So Guitar Center was like, well, you gotta get a co-signer and then you gotta sign up for this Guitar Center credit card and all that stuff. So I'm pretty sure I kept this amp for a long time. I definitely had it for a few years. But when I was at Mikey's Guitars, once again, he had all the cool stuff. They had a Princeton Reverb there that blew mine away. I don't know what it was about, maybe the tolerances on some of the transistors or something, but his just sounded so much smoother. The reverb sounded so much better. And after I heard his, I was like, ooh, I just want to buy yours. But sadly, he'd already sold it to somebody on eBay, so he was going to ship it off the next day, and I was kind of sad about that. So after I got back to my amp at home, I had this disgusting taste in my mouth. I was like, no, I can't keep my amp because it doesn't sound as good as this other one. So I ended up selling my Princeton Reverb amp. Some guy local here in Nashville, he was a session player, and I hope he still has it. Maybe he does. Maybe he enjoyed it more than I did. So that was my Fender Princeton Reverb. Here's a Silverface Fender Bassman. And a real funny story, when I first got this, I got this amp and a 2x12 cab, an Avatar with a vintage 30 and a greenback. So I bought this at Guitar Center, the amp and the cab at the same time. And I immediately went home to my apartment, my very first apartment here in Nashville, and made sure nobody was around, made sure nobody else was in their apartments, and I literally cranked it up in an apartment. I probably could have got arrested from the volume I was playing at, but you know what? I didn't care. So maybe I should have cared a little bit more, but I just didn't. It sounded so good. I was playing some Led Zeppelin and playing some AC/DC and some Skynyrd and all kinds of fun stuff. Definitely a very loud amp, but pretty amazing at the same time. All right, here's the Roland Jazz Chorus 40. So I got this at Guitar Center. I was notorious for going into Guitar Center just nonchalantly going, oh, I'm not going to buy anything. And I go in and go to the amp section and, oh, look at all these cool used amplifiers for really good prices. And I would play them and then buy them. And yeah, that wasn't a good idea. So this was a Jazz Chorus. I had it for about 3 days. I bought it the summer of 2014, and I had a show, I think that night. So I took it to the show, and, you know, I've been playing it all day at that point. So I took it to the show, plugged it in, did my sound check, and then right before, I think it was during sound check, the light turned off, and I wasn't getting any sound out of my amp. So I'm like, uh-oh, this is not good. So I don't think I really figured out what it was. Maybe a fuse blew or something. But the next day, I just went back to Guitar Center. I was like, hey, you know what? It didn't really work out for me. So sorry. So I returned it, not really telling them about the fuse issue, and got my money back for that. So yeah, that was a impulse buy that, you know, didn't really need to happen, but you know, I tried it out. It had a cool chorusy tremolo kind of sound to it, and overdrive sound was actually pretty good. The clean sound obviously was really good. That's the Jazz Chorus from Roland. Now this is the top part of a Line 6 DT25. So what's cool about these amps is designed by Bogner. And you could use this with a Helix HD. It's more like the HD 500 pedal board. And if you had one of their Variax guitars, it was like the Dream guitar setup or something that they advertised. But you basically had different typologies of different amplifier circuits. You had the pentode and triode in different topologies, and then Class A, B, Class A. And so you can basically make channel A like a clean sound and channel B like a dirty sound, and just switch back between them. And, you know, actually sounded really good. But one too many times I would go to turn it on, and the lights kind of hesitated to turn on. So I was like, you know, it's a cool amp, but, you know, I think I'm just going to sell it. So I eventually sold it to somebody else, probably off of Craigslist or something. But yeah, Line 6 DT25. If you ever had one of those, definitely comment down in the section below and let me know what you thought about those amps. All right, here's a Quilter Micropro Mach 2 combo. So I have a few videos on my channel about this one. This is a dual channel amp with a guitar input and a microphone instrument input. So that's really cool for maybe your acoustic players that want to, you know, maybe have a acoustic guitar and a microphone plugged in at the same time. If you want, it had a boost section with the EQ, a limiter, a tremolo, and a reverb. And it had different voicings on there, which is really cool. I think the whole amp weighed maybe like 20 pounds, maybe a little bit less than that. Pretty amazing little amp. But I think in the end, it just sounded a little too boxy for me. This had an 8-inch speaker in it, and my ears are more used to having like a 12-inch speaker sound. So therefore, that really didn't work out. But I did have it for about a year or so before I ended up selling it. Here's a Marshall combo. Now with this one, I couldn't exactly remember which model it was. I just knew it was a small Marshall combo amp. But basically, I walked into Guitar Center, as I, always did, and I picked up a red Gibson SG guitar with the P90 pickups. I think it was the Pete Townsend model, and I plugged into this amp, and I was like, man, this guitar is really cool. Then it was like, hey, the amp is actually really cool. I think I was just trying out different Marshall amps, and that was the guitar I picked up. I should have bought the guitar, but I ended up buying the amplifier instead. And, the amp wasn't bad, but any kind of small combo amp like that just kind of tends to have a boxy sound to my ears, which I really didn't like. So I probably kept it for, I don't know, maybe about a year, maybe 6 months, and eventually found somebody else to buy it from me. So, all right, here's the orange TH30 twin channel. This is my big boy purchase. I never owned an orange amplifier before. So I found a good deal online. I think I paid around $8.50 for it. I had a dirty channel and a clean channel. No reverb. I did have a good effects loop on the back though. And you could swap between full power, half power, and half power, whatever that is. So probably 30 watts, 15 watts. There was a switch on the back. You could take it down to 7 watts if you wanted to. But still, I just never had much luck with dual channel amplifiers, or really multi-channel amps, because I always used pedals for everything I did. I was fighting against myself, being like, all right, I like the clean channel, but I also want to kind of use the dirty channel as well, and didn't really have a good switching system to go between different pedals and different amp channels and reverb on and off and different stuff. So I use this amp a lot on the self-titled record for Feedback Revival. So all the guitar tones that you hear on that album come from this amp. A lot of the solos, a lot of the rhythm stuff. And I was using Line 6 M13 at the time as well. Alright, this amplifier right here. This thing is a beast of an amp. So when I graduated college, I got not a large sum of money, but I got some money for college, for graduating. And I was living on my own at the time. And, I was like, well, it's my money now. I can do what I want with it. So I went to some guitar store off of Nolensville Road, kind of down the road from Nashville Used Music. And I found this dual 212 classic tube series amplifier. This is a Peavey amp. And it had a clean channel and the dirty channel, tremolo, and a power amp section. Can't remember what that was. Probably like a resonance and presence kind of thing. Also had reverb on it. But the problem with this amp was it was so stinking heavy. Very loud. I can't remember how much I sold it for, but I definitely lost. I lost a lot of money. Alright, going on to another Peavey here. This is the Peavey 5150. So, a funny story about this one. I called the Eurotubes.com site because I used JJ tubes for all my amplifiers. And I called the sales guy on there and I was like, you know what? I have a 5150 from Peavey. I want this to be the beast that can't be tamed. You need KT88 power tubes. So like, all right, cool. So, I bought a set, but it had like a little ring around the power tube socket. So I had to cut those off just for the KT88s to properly sit in their spot, because otherwise the little brackets was keeping the power tube from sitting all the way down. So Had a 5150 for, probably kept this for around maybe a year, year and a half. I was living in an apartment at the time, but in the lower basement part of the apartment, I was living with like 4 or 5 other guys. Those were great times. But yeah, I had this amp and I had a 4x12 cab, which was just stupidly loud. And you know, these amps are very noisy. They're very high gain, so even the clean channel was just kind of too noisy. And but I just thought I needed to have a 5150 because that's, you know, that's what you do when you want that tight metal sound. Here's a classic 50 head from Peavey. This actually was a great sounding amp. I bought it from somebody in Crossville, Tennessee. Drove up there, checked it out. I was like, yep, he's selling it for a good price, so I'm gonna snatch it from him while I still can. And this has a cool presence, volume, treble, middle, bass, reverb, post and pre, and normal. So it is a 2-channel amp. I was able to successfully switch, switch the channels via a foot switch and maybe my Boss ES8. Great sounding amplifier. But when I sold this to a country player, I always hate that moment when I'm about to sell something and this new person comes in and just totally blows me away by the playing. And I realize how great the amp sounds because the player sounds great as well. But at the same time, I really didn't need, you know, a 50-watt head. So I think I sold it for just a little bit less than what I bought it for. I didn't lose a whole lot of money on it. But these are great amps. If you're looking for a solid, very high headroom amplifier, the Peavey Classic 50 head is great. Here's an amp I recently sold. This is the Teale stripe Peavey Bandit. And this has a really great sounding clean channel with a separate EQ per channel. So you got the clean, volume, and then bass, middle, treble. And then you got the dirt channel, which has a saturation knob, a post knob for your master volume, then a separate EQ. Also has a reverb knob on there, sounds great. And the effects loop sounds really good as well. What's sad about these amps is sometimes you'll get a drop in volume. And what you have to do, you have to spray some contact cleaner in the send and return of the effects loop and kind of take a Q-tip or something and kind of swab it out, clean out the dust, to keep that functioning properly. But other than that, these amps are very, very sturdy, sound great. And if you ever come across one, you can find one for pretty cheap. So, all right, here's a Pignose G40V. So this is one of those, short-lived moments where I was like, hey, I already had another Pignose, battery-powered amp. So I wanted to try out a tube, amp from Pignose, and probably had it a total of maybe 3 or 4 months, not very long. It did sound really good though. I eventually sold it on Reverb and shipped it out wherever it went, and it's pretty much that. Alright, so here's the one of the amplifiers I'm currently using, and this is the Quilter 101 Mini Reverb. One of the videos I made comparing this amp with a Fender Princeton amplifier. I think a Blackface, and man, this thing just sounds really good. It's nice and loud, and has tone for days, and great sounding EQ section. The reverb sounds excellent. This does go up to 50 watts, depending on where the gain is, obviously. And then it also has a limiter, which kind of helps compress and kind of squeeze the sound a little bit, which is cool. And it does have an effects loop and a headphone output as well. Alright, here's another Quilter amp. This is the Interblock 45. So this is what I'm using on my HX Effects pedal board as my amplifier. And man, it sounds so good. It has an effects loop, send and return. It's got 2 different voicings for the either like a full Q or a vintage voicing. I prefer the vintage voicing myself. And it also has a flat range for response or a cab which is not a true cab simulation. I go into that in a separate video demonstrating the Quilter Interblock 45, but you'll have to watch that video for that. But it does have a balance line out and a headphone out, which is really cool. And I run my, I have an 8 ohm speaker cab. This is actually running at 33 watts. Still playing loud, and it sounds great. And then here's the Quilter Pro Block 200, which has made its appearance in quite a few videos over the last year or so, year or two. And this has a gain limiter tri-Q, which actually is, you know, very sweepable. Has, you know, you can still get a lot of good EQ settings in there. A reverb, a high cut, kind of take away some of the fizz of your higher gain sounds. And then this does go up to 200 watts, so hang on to your pants. All right, here's the Mesa Boogie dual rectifier 100 watt head. I want to say I borrowed money from my friend Robbie to buy this amp. I eventually paid him back, but it was just something I was like, oh, I have to have this amplifier to be a more professional player and sound professional and whatever else. And, you know, still, I mean, it's a great amp. Did I need it? Probably not. But it had 3 channels on it. It had a clean, a drive, or a crunch, and a high gain. And you had your solo boost knob over here, and you had your overall output over here. Pretty sure I had an effects loop in the back. Can't remember if I had a foot switch that goes along with it, but really cool amplifier. I actually wouldn't mind owning one of those again, but right now in my life, I just don't need a tube amp right now, so that's the way it goes. Alright, so here's a Traynor guitar mate, and a funny story about this one is I actually modded this amp twice. One, I took it to the amp doctor in Franklin area, and he modded it. You know, he's like, hey, I tweaked it, you know, for a few days and kind of made it sound the way I wanted, kind of thing. And I still just wasn't quite happy with it, which is probably just the nature of the amp itself. It just wasn't that great. So then I had Mike E mod it to more like a Marshall kind of sound. And I still just, yeah, it sounded cool, but I just wasn't that into it. And I tried swapping tubes and tried different stuff, and I wasted so much money on this amp, it was just stupid. Because each mod probably cost me $200, $250 maybe. And I think I bought the amp for maybe $300, maybe $400. So I just put way too much money into this amplifier to try and make it sound the way I wanted, and I just couldn't do it. So modding guitar amps is not always the best way to go. And last but not least, here's the Vox AC15. So this is a great little combo amp. It's got your top boost section. You got your normal volume. You got a reverb level, a tremolo, and then your master volume and tone cut. So you can either choose between normal and top boost and get your desired level of gain, and then just control the overall volume, you know, with the master volume knob here. The tone cut is basically like a low pass filter. So as you roll that back, it's actually cutting out a lot of the high end. And then it does have a very sweet sounding tremolo and reverb. So, alright guys, that has been all the amps I've ever owned. And I might be missing one or two, maybe. But if I am, I only owned it for maybe like a week or so and didn't really count anyway. So, but there's all the amps I've ever owned. If you've enjoyed this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. And if you've owned any of these amps in the past, just like I have, go ahead and comment down below and maybe tell me a cool story about the amp you owned and why you bought it. And maybe if you sold it, you know, sold it for way less than you bought it for, and what else you bought. Be sure to hit that bell icon so you'll be notified every time I release new content. I do have a video coming out every day of the week, so I'm a pretty busy guy. But I am Dr. McFarland. I will see you in the next video. Keep rocking. Hey guys, thanks for checking out my videos and my YouTube channel. If you want to see a lot more cool content, be sure to head over to drmcfarlandstudios.com.